The day I found out, the ink was still drying. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my studio, my sanctuary, and watched a stranger run his hand across my piano like he owned the air in the room. My mother avoided my eyes. My father wouldn't even step inside. And then he said it, casually, like he was asking for salt at dinner. We finalized everything this morning. Everything. That word echoed like a gunshot in my chest, because what they sold wasn't just the studio. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They hadn't just given away my future. They had signed away a part of me I didn't even know could be taken. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button, because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect me. But I didn't expect my story to start the way it did, quietly, almost invisibly, like a crack forming in glass before it shatters. It started with a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I had come home early that evening. The sky was still that soft blue that lingers before sunset, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt. I had just finished recording a new track, one I was proud of, and I couldn't wait to show my parents. The studio had been my world for years. Every late night, every tear, every victory, it all lived in that room. But when I stepped inside the house, I heard voices in the kitchen. My father's tone was low, tense. My mother sounded unsure. "You promised this would help him," she said. "It will," my father replied quickly. "This is the only way. He needs this chance." Him. I didn't need to ask who that was. Daniel, my older brother, the golden child, the one who always had a dream that required someone else to sacrifice something. I stayed quiet, standing just outside the kitchen doorway, my heart starting to beat faster. "What about her?" my mother asked softly. There was a pause, a long one, and then my father said something that I will never forget. "She'll understand." I didn't. Not then. Not ever. I walked in like nothing had happened, forcing a smile, holding my phone up like a peace offering. "Hey, I just finished something. I think it might actually go viral." My mother turned too quickly, her expression shifting into something rehearsed. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." My father nodded, but he didn't look at me. "That's great." That was it. No excitement, no curiosity, just dismissal. Something inside me tightened, but I ignored it, because that's what I always did. I went to my studio instead. The moment I opened the door, the familiar scent of wood and wires wrapped around me like a hug. The piano sat in the corner just as I left it. My mic, my setup, everything was exactly where it belonged. This was my space, the only place where I felt seen. And I remember sitting there that night, playing the track I had just recorded, imagining the comments, the shares, the messages from people saying my music meant something to them. Because it did. It was more than music. It was survival. But what I didn't know was that while I was dreaming in that room, plans were already being made to take it away from me. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up to the sound of unfamiliar voices. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard footsteps, heavy ones, moving through the hallway. I sat up, my stomach twisting. Something was wrong. I stepped out of my room and followed the noise, my heart pounding louder with each step. And then I saw them. 3 men, strangers, standing inside my studio. One of them was taking measurements, another was looking at the walls, nodding like he was already imagining changes. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I expected. They turned, surprised. Before they could answer, my father appeared behind me. "It's okay," he said quickly. "They're just assessing the space." "Assessing? For what?" I demanded. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, everything cracked. "For a project. Daniel has an opportunity, a startup. This space is perfect for it." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense. "You mean you're letting him use it?" I asked. My father didn't answer immediately, and that's when I noticed my mother standing behind him, her eyes red, her hands clasped tightly together. "No," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "Agreement?" I repeated. "What agreement?" "The studio," he started, avoiding my gaze. "We sold it." The entire studio. Sold. The word didn't feel real. "You what?" I whispered. "It's not just selling," he added quickly. "It's an investment for Daniel. This could change everything for him." For him. I stepped into the room, my eyes scanning every corner like I was trying to memorize it before it disappeared. "This is mine. I built this. I paid for most of this equipment. You can't just—" "It's part of the house," my father interrupted. "Legally, it belongs to us." Legally. That word. Cold. Final. "But you knew," I said, turning to my mother. "You knew what this meant to me." She couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Sorry. That's all she had. I felt something break inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a thread snapping. "So that's it? You just decided my future doesn't matter?" "It's not like that," my father said, frustration creeping into his voice. "You're talented. You'll find another way." Another way? As if this hadn't been the way I fought for years to build. As if starting over was just easy. As if what they were taking wasn't everything. I looked at the stranger, the one who had been running his hand across my piano earlier. I couldn't breathe. The words on the page blurred, then snapped back into focus like they were demanding to be seen. My name wasn't just there. It was embedded, repeated, referenced in ways that made no sense unless this contract had been built around me, not just the studio. My fingers tightened around the paper. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low, shaking. My father stepped closer, his tone firm but controlled. "It's just standard documentation. You're overreacting." Overreacting? I flipped to the highlighted section again, my eyes locking onto a phrase that made my stomach twist. Transfer of associated creative assets and rights. Creative assets. Rights. "You sold my work?" I said, louder now. My mother flinched. My father exhaled sharply. "It's not like that." "Then explain it," I snapped, my voice cracking, "because this says everything created in this studio, everything tied to this space, now belongs to him?" I looked at the signature page. A name I didn't recognize stared back at me. Not Daniel, someone else, someone who wasn't family. "Who is this?" I demanded. My father hesitated again, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "He's Daniel's business partner," he said finally. "He's funding the startup." Funding. So this stranger, the one casually inspecting my piano, wasn't just a buyer. He was an owner, and not just of the room, of my work. My chest tightened. "You had no right," I whispered. My father's expression hardened. "Legally, we did." That word again, like a weapon this time. I'm not talking about legal. I'm talking about right. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Daniel wasn't even here. That realization hit me like another blow. He didn't have to be. He'd already gotten what he wanted without facing me. I flipped through the pages faster now, my hands trembling. Dates, clauses, signatures. And then I saw it. The date of agreement. My heart skipped. It was from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks! 3 weeks of smiling at me. 3 weeks of asking about my music. 3 weeks of pretending nothing was happening while they quietly signed everything away behind my back. I felt sick. "You've been planning this," I said, my voice hollow. My mother finally looked at me, tears in her eyes. "We didn't know how to tell you." "So you didn't?" I said bitterly. "You just let me keep working in here like nothing was wrong." She had no answer, and that silence said more than words ever could. I looked around the studio again, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It felt taken, like I was already a stranger in my own space. "When does it happen?" I asked quietly. "It already has," my father replied. The finality in his voice hit harder than anything else. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay standing even though my legs felt weak. "So what now? I just pack up my life and leave?" "You can take your personal belongings," he said, "but the equipment is mine. I bought most of it." "Not legally," he said, his tone sharp now. "It was purchased under this household. It's included." Included. That word felt like theft dressed up as paperwork. I laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "You really thought this through, didn't you?" Neither of them answered, and that's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision, a calculated one. I closed the folder slowly, my hands steady now in a way that scared me. "Does Daniel even know what's in this contract?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "He knows enough." Enough. That meant no. He didn't know everything. Or maybe he didn't care. I looked at the stranger again. He was watching us now, his expression unreadable. "You knew," I said to him. He gave a small shrug. "I read what I sign." The casualness of it made something inside me snap. "You're stealing my work," I said. He tilted his head slightly. "I'm acquiring assets. There's a difference." Assets. I felt my pulse in my ears. "Those assets are my songs, my recordings, my voice." He didn't respond right away, and for a moment I thought just maybe he would show some humanity. But then he said, calmly, "Then you should have protected them better." That was it. That was the moment something shifted completely. Not just anger, not just pain, clarity. Because I realized something important in that instant. No one here was going to fix this. No one was going to suddenly understand what they had done. No one was going to give it back. If I wanted anything, my work, my future, my voice, I was going to have to fight for it. I placed the folder back on the desk carefully. "Fine," I said quietly. My father frowned. "Fine?" I nodded slowly. "You've made your decision." I looked at my mother one last time, searching for something, anything, but all I saw was regret without action, and that wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "Now I'll make mine," I said. I turned and walked out of the studio, each step heavier than the last. I didn't cry, not yet, because something else had taken its place. Something colder, something sharper. I went to my room and shut the door, leaning against it as the weight of everything finally pressed down on me. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was racing. The contract, the clauses, the rights. There had to be something. There had to be a way they got this so wrong that it could be undone. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up every document I had, receipts, files, timestamps, anything that proved what was mine, because if they wanted to play this legally, then fine, so would I. Hours passed without me noticing. I dug through emails, old backups, cloud storage, anything that could prove ownership, creation, authorship. And then I found something. My breath caught. It was an email, 3 months old, from a platform I'd uploaded my music to, a confirmation of intellectual property registration. My name was on it, not the house, not my parents, me. My heart started to race. This wasn't just something, this was everything. Because if my work was legally registered under me, then that clause in the contract, it didn't just cross a line, it broke the entire deal. My hands moved quickly now, opening more files, connecting pieces. And the more I looked, the clearer it became. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had made a mistake, a big one. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was something else, something dangerous. Because now I had something they didn't expect, and I was about to use it. But before I could even process my next move, there was a knock on my door. Slow, deliberate. I froze. "We need to talk." My father's voice came from the other side. My grip tightened on the laptop because something in his tone had changed, and suddenly I knew this wasn't over, not even close. I didn't answer right away. My eyes stayed locked on the screen, on my name, on the proof that what they tried to take wasn't entirely theirs to give away. The knock came again, firmer this time. "Open the door," my father said, his voice carrying that edge I knew too well, the one that meant this wasn't a request. I slowly closed my laptop, but I didn't move toward the door. Not yet, because something had shifted inside me, and I needed to hold on to it for just a second longer. That feeling of not being powerless anymore. The knock came a third time. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. I let out a quiet breath and finally pushed myself off the chair, walking to the door and opening it just enough to see him. He looked different. Not angry, not dismissive, calculating. "What?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He glanced past me into the room, like he was checking for something, then back at me. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in slowly, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than it should have. We stood there in silence for a moment, the distance between us heavier than any argument we'd ever had. "You shouldn't have grabbed that contract like that." "You shouldn't have signed it," I shot back. He ignored that, pacing slightly like he was choosing his words carefully. "You don't understand how these things work." I crossed my arms. "Then explain it to me." He stopped and looked at me. Really looked this time. "This deal, it's bigger than just the studio." "Clearly," I said, my voice sharp. "It includes my work too." His jaw tightened. "That's a technicality." "No," I said firmly, "it's not." There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe even concern. "Where did you get that idea?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked back to my desk, opened my laptop again, and turned it toward him. "From this." He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the screen. His expression changed instantly. Subtle, but unmistakable. The confidence slipped. "What is this?" he asked. "Proof," I said, "that my music, everything I created, is registered under my name, legally." The word hung in the air this time. but now it belonged to me. He stared at the screen longer than necessary, and in that silence I saw it. The crack. The moment he realized something hadn't gone according to plan. "This doesn't change anything," he said, but his voice lacked the certainty from before. "It changes everything," I replied quietly, "because you can't sell what you don't own." He straightened, his tone sharpening again like he was trying to regain control. "That contract includes all creative output associated with the property. And that's where you messed up," I said, my voice steady now, "because association isn't ownership." For a second, neither of us spoke, and then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled, but it wasn't warm, it wasn't proud, it was cold. "You've been doing your research," he said. "I had to. No one else was going to protect me." That landed harder than I thought it would. His smile faded just slightly. "You think this is about hurting you?" he asked. I stared at him. "Isn't it?" "No," he said firmly. "This is about survival, about making sure this family has something real, something sustainable." "By taking everything I built?" I said, disbelief creeping back in. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Daniel's startup. This is a real opportunity. Investors are involved. Contracts are signed. We can't just back out because you're upset." Upset? The word almost made me laugh. "I'm not upset. I'm being erased." That stopped him. For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face, something human, but it disappeared just as quickly. "You're overreacting again," he said. "Then why are you here?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately, and that's when I knew. This conversation wasn't about explaining, it was about control. He stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. "Listen to me. This deal is happening. There's too much at stake, but we can make adjustments." Adjustments? I narrowed my eyes. What kind of adjustments? "You can stay involved, work with Daniel, be part of the startup. Your music, your skills, they could be integrated into the project." I blinked, trying to process what he just said. "You want me to work for something you took from me?" His expression hardened again. "I'm offering you a way forward." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're offering me a way to pretend this is okay." Silence stretched between us again, but this time it felt different, because I wasn't the one cornered anymore. He was. I could see it in the way his posture had shifted, in the way his words were starting to sound less like commands and more like negotiations. "What do you want?" he asked finally. There it was, the question I had been waiting for. I took a slow breath, steadying myself, because this was the moment. This was where everything could change. "I want my rights back," I said simply. "That's not possible," he replied immediately. "Then neither is your deal," I said just as quickly. His eyes narrowed. "You don't have that kind of leverage." I held his gaze. "Don't I?" For a second, something dangerous passed between us. A realization that this wasn't going to be easy for either of us anymore. There was something in the way he said it, light, almost distracted, that made my chest tighten even more. He really didn't know. Not the full truth, anyway. I stepped closer to the window, staring out at the fading light as I steadied my voice. "Where are you right now?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "Why? You sound serious. I'm at the office space. Well, technically it's still yours, I guess." He laughed again like it was a harmless joke. My grip tightened on the phone. "Not for long," I said quietly. There was a pause. "What does that mean?" he asked, the humor fading. "It means we need to talk in person, now." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear the shift in his mind the moment he realized this wasn't just a casual check-in. "Fine," he said slowly. "Come here." I didn't respond. I just ended the call. I grabbed my laptop, the contract folder, and every piece of proof I had, shoving them into my bag with a kind of urgency that felt like adrenaline mixed with fear. Because this was the point where everything could either collapse or explode, and I wasn't sure which would be worse. The drive there felt longer than usual. Every red light felt like it was holding me back, every second stretching into something unbearable. My mind replayed everything: my father's words, my mother's silence, that stranger's calm voice calling my work assets, and underneath it all, a question that wouldn't stop echoing. Did Daniel really not know, or was he just pretending? I pulled up outside the studio, no, not my studio anymore, and sat there for a moment, staring at the building. The lights were on. I could see movement inside. He was there, building something on top of everything I had lost. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding with every step toward the door. This used to feel like home. Now, it felt like walking into enemy territory. I pushed the door open without knocking. Daniel looked up from across the room, surprised. "Hey," he said, standing up. "That was fast." For a second, I just looked at him. My brother, the one who used to sit on that same floor while I played music, cheering me on like I was the most talented person in the world. The one who promised we'd both make it someday. That version of him felt like a memory from someone else's life now. "What's going on?" he asked, noticing my expression. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the desk and dropped the folder in front of him. It landed with a heavy thud that seemed to echo in the silence. "Read it," I said. He frowned slightly but opened it, flipping through the pages with mild curiosity at first. But as his eyes moved across the lines, that curiosity faded, replaced by something else. Confusion, then tension, then something darker. He stopped on the same page that had shaken me earlier. "What is this?" he asked, looking up at me. "That's your deal," I said quietly. "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. This isn't what I agreed to." My stomach twisted. "What did you agree to?" He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. "It was supposed to be just the space, the studio, as an investment. That's it." I let out a slow breath. "Then you might want to read that again," I said. He did, and this time I watched it happen in real time. The realization. The moment it clicked. His face went pale. "They didn't tell me about this," he said, almost to himself. "I figured," I replied. He looked up at me, something frantic in his eyes now. "This clause, this doesn't make sense. Why would they include your work?" "Because they could, or at least they thought they could." He shook his head, flipping through more pages like he was searching for something to prove this wasn't real. "This is going to be a problem," he muttered. "A problem?" I echoed. "Daniel, this is my life." He stopped, looking at me again, and for the first time since all this began, he really saw me. Not as an obstacle, not as a complication, but as the person he had just stepped on to get here. "I didn't know," he said quietly. I studied his face, searching for any sign of deception, but all I saw was shock and guilt, real guilt. "You should have asked," I said. He swallowed hard. "I trusted them." "So did I replied softly. That landed. He looked back at the contract, then at the room around him like everything suddenly felt unstable. "If this is true," he started. "It is," I cut in, "and there's more." I pulled out my laptop, opening the registration documents and turning the screen toward him. My music is legally registered under my name, which means that clause, it doesn't just overstep, it invalidates part of the agreement. He stared at the screen, his expression tightening. This could shut everything down, he said. Yes, I replied. He exhaled slowly, running both hands through his hair now. Investors are already involved. Money's been moved. Plans are in motion. Then you should have made sure those plans weren't built on something stolen, I said, my voice firm. He flinched slightly at that word. Stolen. 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 He flinched slightly at that slighten. He flinched slightly at that word. Stolen. 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 He flinched slightly at that word. The drive back felt different this time. Not slow, not heavy. It felt like a countdown. Daniel didn't turn on the radio. He didn't try to fill the silence with small talk. Both of us were locked in our own thoughts, but they were moving in the same direction now, towards something inevitable. I watched the road blur past, my fingers curled tightly around the edge of my bag. Everything I had known about my family was unraveling faster than I could process, and yet there was a strange clarity in it too, like the truth, once exposed, refused to be hidden again. "When did you sign?" I asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "About a week ago," he said. My chest tightened. A week? So even after they signed the full agreement 3 weeks ago, they still brought him in later? Still didn't tell him everything? "They didn't show you the full contract, did they?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, just the parts related to the space, the investment structure, the equity split." Equity. I almost laughed again. It all sounded so clean when you stripped away what it cost. "And you didn't think to ask about the rest?" I said. He exhaled. "I trusted Dad. I thought he wouldn't cross that line." I turned to look out the window again. "He already did," I said quietly. That settled between us like something final. We pulled into the driveway, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The house looked the same as it always had, but it didn't feel the same, not anymore. "Once we go in," Daniel said, his voice low, "this is going to get messy." I nodded. "It already is," I replied. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Yeah, you're right." We stepped out of the car together, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like we were on opposite sides of something. It felt like we were walking into a storm, together. The front door was unlocked. Daniel pushed it open, and the moment we stepped inside, I felt it, that tension in the air, like something was already waiting for us. My parents were in the living room. My mother was sitting on the couch, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes red again. My father was standing near the window, his posture rigid. They both looked up as we entered, and the moment they saw Daniel next to me, everything changed. "What's going on?" my father asked, his tone sharp, guarded. Daniel didn't waste time. He walked straight into the room and dropped the contract onto the table in front of them. "You want to tell me why this includes her intellectual property?" he asked, his voice controlled but tense. Silence. My mother looked at the papers, then at me, then back at my father. My father didn't move. "It's part of the agreement," he said simply. Daniel let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "That's not an explanation." "It's what was necessary," he replied. "Necessary for who?" I cut in. My father's eyes snapped to me. "For this family," he said firmly. "No," I said, stepping forward. For your plan, not mine. My mother shook her head slightly. Please, can we just talk about this calmly? We are talking, Daniel said, his voice rising now, but you're not being honest. My father's expression hardened. I've been nothing but honest. Then why didn't you show me this part of the contract? Daniel shot back, tapping the page. He didn't answer right away, and that silence was louder than anything. Because you knew I wouldn't agree, Daniel said, the realization hitting him in real time. My father exhaled slowly. You would have come around. No, Daniel said firmly, I wouldn't have. The room felt like it was closing in. My mother stood up, her voice trembling. Please, we can fix this. There has to be a way. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw it clearly. She wasn't part of the decision, she was part of the silence, and that silence had cost me everything. I can't sell my work, I said, my voice steady now. It's registered under my name. Legally, that clause doesn't hold. My father's jaw tightened. We've already discussed this. No, I cut him off. You dismissed it. That's not the same thing. Daniel stepped forward, backing me up. She's right. If her intellectual property isn't yours to transfer, then this contract is flawed. My father looked between us, something shifting in his expression. Not anger, not frustration, something closer to calculation again. Even if that part is contested, he said slowly, the rest of the deal stands. Not if it's tied to misrepresentation, Daniel replied. Investors won't like that. That hit. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. You're willing to risk everything over this? He asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes, he said, and for a moment the room went completely still, because that word yes meant something bigger than just this argument. It meant lines were being drawn, and for the first time my father wasn't in control of all of them. You don't understand what you're doing, my father said, his voice low now, almost dangerous. No, Daniel replied, I think I finally do. My mother stepped between us slightly, her hands shaking. Please, we can fix this. There has to be a way. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw it clearly. There is a way, I said quietly. They all looked at me. You remove the clause. You return full rights of my work to me, in writing, legally binding. My father shook his head immediately. It's not that simple. It is, I said. You just don't want it to be. Daniel nodded. She's right. If we amend the contract before this escalates, we might be able to contain the damage. And the investor, my father asked sharply, will have to accept the revision or walk away. That hung in the air, and we all knew what that meant. If the investor walked away, the entire startup could collapse. Years of planning, gone. My father looked at Daniel like he was seeing a stranger. You'd throw this away? He asked. Daniel met his gaze. I'm not the one who built it on something broken. That was it. That was the moment everything fractured completely. My father's composure cracked just for a second, but it was enough. I saw it, the anger, the realization that things were slipping beyond his control. You're making a mistake, he said again, but this time it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like desperation. No, I said softly. You did. Silence fell over the room again, heavier than before. And then my father did something unexpected. He laughed, not loudly, not happily. It was short, sharp, almost bitter. You think this ends with a simple revision? He said, shaking his head. It has to start somewhere, Daniel replied. No, my father said, his voice dropping. It already started. A chill ran down. The room went silent in a way that didn't feel empty. It felt loaded, like every word from this point forward could trigger something none of us were ready for. My pulse started to pound in my ears again. He knows? Daniel repeated, his voice lower now, sharper. My father nodded once, slow and deliberate. "From the beginning," he said. My stomach dropped. That meant this wasn't a misunderstanding, not a loophole, not an accident. This was planned. "You're saying," I began, my voice unsteady despite everything, "that someone knowingly agreed to take something that wasn't yours to give?" My father didn't flinch. "I'm saying he saw value," he replied. "In stealing?" I shot back. "In opportunity," he corrected. The way he said it, so calm, so detached, made something cold settle in my chest. Daniel took a step back, running his hands through his hair again, but this time it wasn't frustration. It was realization. "This isn't just risky," he said slowly. "This is illegal." My father's expression hardened slightly. "Careful with that word." "No," Daniel snapped. "You should have been careful." The tension in the room spiked again, sharp and immediate. My mother stepped forward, her voice shaking more than before. "We didn't think it would go this far." "Then what did you think would happen?" I asked, my voice quieter now, but somehow more cutting. She opened her mouth, but no words came. And I understood. She hadn't thought it through. None of them had. Not fully. They had seen a solution to one problem and ignored the cost of it. They had gambled, and I was the collateral. Daniel turned to me, his voice urgent. "We need to see everything, every document, every communication with this investor." I nodded immediately. "Yes." My father didn't move. "That's not necessary," he said. Daniel let out a sharp breath. "It absolutely is." "You're overcomplicating this," my father replied. "No," Daniel said firmly, "you're underestimating it." There was a shift in his tone now, something solid, something unmovable, and for the first time, my father didn't interrupt him. "If he knew about this clause," Daniel continued, "then he's either expecting pushback or he's already prepared for it." Prepared. That word sent a chill down my spine because it meant this wasn't just about a bad contract. It meant someone else was already steps ahead. "What kind of person does that?" I asked quietly. My father didn't answer, but Daniel did. "The kind who doesn't lose," he said. The room felt colder after that. My mind started racing again, but this time it wasn't just about my work. It was about who we were dealing with, because this wasn't just a family betrayal anymore. This was something bigger, something calculated. "What's his name?" I asked. My father hesitated, and that hesitation was enough to confirm what I was already starting to feel. "Dad," Daniel said, his voice firm, "we need to know." Finally, my father spoke. "Adrian Keller." The name hung in the air, unfamiliar but heavy, like it carried weight we didn't fully understand yet. "And you trust him?" Daniel asked, disbelief creeping into his tone. "I trust the deal," my father replied. That wasn't an answer. Not really, and we all knew it. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. "Then show us everything," I said. "If you're so sure this is fine, prove it." My father looked between us again, measuring something in his mind, calculating outcomes, risks, control. But this time, he wasn't the only one doing that, and I think he realized it, because after a long, tense pause, he nodded. Once. "Fine," he said. He walked past us toward his office, his steps slower than usual, like each one carried more weight than before. We followed him without a word. The office door opened, and he went straight to his desk, pulling out a locked drawer. For a second, I noticed his hand hesitate over the key, just for a second, and that told me everything I needed to know. He didn't want us to see what was inside, but it was too late for that now. He unlocked it and pulled out a thick file, bigger than the one I had found earlier. He placed it on the desk without speaking. Daniel stepped forward first, opening it and flipping through the pages quickly. I moved closer, looking over his shoulder, and almost immediately, I saw it. Emails, contracts, addendums, and then a separate agreement. My breath caught. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to it. Daniel pulled it out, his expression tightening as he read. It's a secondary clause, he said slowly. Contingency terms. Contingency. My stomach twisted. For what? I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the page, his face going pale. And then he looked up at me. For non-compliance, he said. My heart skipped. Non-compliance with what? I pressed. He swallowed hard. If you challenge the original agreement, he has the right to pursue damages. The words hit like a punch. Damages? I repeated. Financial. And he hesitated. And that hesitation was worse than anything else. And what? I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked back at the page, then at me. And full injunction over disputed assets until resolution. My mind struggled to catch up. What does that mean? I asked quietly. But I already knew. The way he was looking at me told me everything. It means, Daniel said slowly, he could legally block you from using your own work until the case is resolved. The room spun for a second. I felt it, that drop, that terrifying realization, because this wasn't just about taking what was mine. It was about locking me out of it completely, silencing me. He planned this, I whispered. My father didn't respond, but he didn't deny it either, and that silence was louder than anything. You knew, I said, turning to him. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. I knew there were Everything after that moved fast. Not chaotic, fast, like we had stepped onto a track that had already been laid, and now there was no way off it. Daniel and I stayed in that office for hours, going through every document, every clause, every line that Adrian Keller had quietly built into this deal like a trap waiting to snap shut. And the more we read, the clearer it became. This wasn't just protection, it was control, precise, intentional control. He boxed us in from every angle, Daniel muttered, flipping another page. If we stay quiet, he owns everything. If we fight, he freezes everything. I leaned against the desk, arms crossed, my mind racing faster than my heartbeat. Then we don't stay inside the box, I said quietly. He looked up at me, eyes narrowing slightly. You're thinking something. I nodded. He built this to win legally, which means he's counting on us to play by those rules. Daniel exhaled slowly. And if we don't, I met his gaze, then it stops being just a legal problem. There was a pause, not hesitation, calculation. You're talking about exposure, he said. I didn't answer right away because saying it out loud made it real. But it was already real. Yes, I said finally. The word landed heavy. My father, who had been silent for most of this, finally stepped forward. That would be a mistake, he said sharply. You think dragging this into public will help? It could destroy everything. I turned to him. Everything's already been destroyed, I said quietly. He flinched, and for once he didn't argue. Daniel ran his hair through his hair again, pacing now. If we go public, he said, thinking out loud, we shift the pressure. Investors don't like risk. They don't like controversy. Exactly, I said. He built this to control us privately, but publicly, that's different. It could force him to back off, or push him harder, my father warned. Either way, I said, my voice steady, we're not silent anymore. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was decision. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at me. If we do this, there's no undoing it, he said. I know, I replied. He nodded slowly. Then we do it right. That was the moment. The line crossed, the shift from defense to attack. We didn't waste time. Daniel pulled out his laptop, already drafting a strategy, while I opened mine, pulling together everything, my registrations, timestamps, original files, proof of authorship, every piece of evidence that showed the truth. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a case, and we were about to present it to the world. We need to control the narrative from the start, Daniel said. Clear, factual, no emotion. No, I cut in. He looked up. Not no emotion, honest emotion. This isn't just numbers and contracts. This is real. He studied me for a second, then nodded. You're right, he said. We worked side by side, the tension turning into focus, the fear sharpening into something almost dangerous. And then my phone buzzed. I froze. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Unknown number, but somehow I knew. Daniel saw my expression. What is it? He asked quietly. I didn't answer. I just picked up the phone and answered. Hello? There was a brief silence on the other end, and then a voice. Calm, smooth, controlled. I was wondering when you'd call, he said. My chest tightened. Adrian Keller, I said, more statement than question. A soft chuckle. I'm glad we can skip introductions, he replied. Daniel's eyes locked onto mine, tension snapping back into the room. How did you get my number? I asked. You'd be surprised what's included in an agreement, he said lightly. That sent a chill down my spine. This man, he wasn't reacting. He was anticipating everything. He continued, I assume you've read the full contract by now. I have, I said, keeping my voice steady. Good. Then you understand the position you're in. I felt my grip tighten on the phone. I understand that you're trying to take something that isn't yours. There was a small pause, and then he laughed. Not loudly, but enough to make my skin crawl. No, he said calmly, I'm taking something that was offered. My jaw clenched. It wasn't theirs to offer, I shot back. That's not how the document reads, he replied smoothly. Daniel shook his head slightly, already frustrated just listening to him. Then the document is wrong, I said. There was a shift in his tone now, subtle, but there. Careful, he said, you're stepping into complicated territory. You built it that way, I replied. I built opportunity, he corrected. What you choose to do with it is up to you. Opportunity, that word again, like this was some kind of gift. My chest burned with anger now. You call this opportunity? You lock me out of my own work if I fight back. That's not opportunity, that's a threat. Another pause, longer this time, and then his voice dropped slightly, less polished, more real. It's leverage, he said, and there it was, the truth. No pretending, no soft language, just power. Daniel leaned closer, whispering, put him on speaker. I did, the room filled with his voice now. Let me make something very clear, I said louder now. I'm not going to let this go quietly. I wouldn't expect you to, Irene replied. You seem persistent. I mean, I won't be controlled. Same thing, he answered smoothly. Daniel stepped forward. You've created a legally unstable agreement, Daniel said firmly. If this escalates, it won't end the way you think. Adrian was silent for a second, and then, Daniel, he said, almost amused, I was wondering when you joined the conversation. Daniel's expression tightened. You misrepresented the deal, Daniel continued. That alone is unfortunate, but not uncommon. The casual dismissal of it made my stomach turn. You think this is just going to go away? I asked. No, he said calmly. I think it's going to play out exactly as designed. The confidence in his voice, it wasn't arrogance, it was certainty, and that was what made it terrifying. Then you're wrong, I said quietly. There was a pause, a real one this time. Am I? He asked softly. I glanced at Dan. The moment the call ended, everything became real. Not in theory, not in possibility, in motion. There was no more planning, no more hesitation, just action. Daniel moved first, opening his laptop again, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. We do this clean, he said. No exaggeration, no gaps, just facts, proof, and your voice. My voice. That word landed differently now. Not fragile, not something that could be taken, something that could cut through everything. I sat down beside him, opening my own files, pulling together every piece of evidence into one place, the registrations, the timestamps, the original recordings, even behind-the-scenes clips that showed the creation process. This wasn't just about proving ownership. It was about telling the truth in a way no contract could twist. "We need a platform," Daniel said, "something immediate, something that can't be buried." I didn't even hesitate. "My channel," I said. He looked at me for a second, surprised. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. "It started there," I said quietly. "It ends there, too. Because that space, my channel, was the one thing they hadn't taken from me, the one place where my voice was still mine. And now, I was about to use it." We worked fast. The video wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. I recorded it in one take. No script, no filters, just truth. I looked straight into the camera, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. I trusted the people closest to me, and they made a decision that changed everything. I explained it all. The studio, the contract, the clause, the investor, everything. But I didn't scream, I didn't break down, I just told it exactly as it happened. And then I showed the proof, the documents, the registrations, the parts they thought no one would see. By the time I finished recording, my hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release, like I had finally taken back something that had been slipping away from me for too long. Daniel uploaded it immediately, no second guessing, no delay. And then we waited. The first few minutes felt like hours. The screen refreshed once, twice, then the views started climbing, slow at first, then faster. Comments began to appear, confusion, shock, anger, but not at me, at the situation, at the betrayal. And then something shifted. The video started spreading, shares, messages, people tagging others, the kind of momentum you don't control, you just watch as it grows. And within an hour, it was everywhere. My phone buzzed nonstop, not just notifications, calls, unknown numbers, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, even media inquiries. Daniel looked at me, his expression somewhere between disbelief and realization. "You just changed the entire game," he said. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning, because if we could see it, so could he. My phone rang again. This time, it wasn't unknown. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a second before answering. "Hello?" His voice came through, strained, tighter than I had ever heard him. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. "I told the truth," I said. There was a pause, a long one, and when he spoke again, there was no anger in his voice, just something heavier. "You've made this very difficult," he said. "It already was," I replied softly. He didn't argue, he didn't defend, he just exhaled. "He called," my father said finally. My chest tightened. "I'm sure he did," I replied. "He wants to meet," he added. I glanced at Daniel, who was already watching me closely. "Then we meet him," I said. My father hesitated. "This won't be simple," he warned. "It never was," I said, and I ended the call. 2 hours later, we were sitting across from him, Adrian Keller. He looked exactly the same as before, calm, composed, unreadable. But there was something different now, something subtle. The control wasn't absolute anymore. The room was quiet, the tension thick enough to feel. "That was an impressive move," Adrian said finally, his eyes on me. I didn't respond right away. I just held his gaze, because this time I wasn't intimidated. "You forced my hand," he continued. "No," I said calmly, "you forced mine first." A flicker of something passed through his expression. Not anger, not frustration, Respect. You've complicated things, he said. Good, I replied. He leaned back slightly, studying me. You realize this doesn't end with a video, he said. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. Silence stretched between us. And then he smiled. But this time it wasn't cold. It was measured. You want your rights back, he said. I nodded. All of them, I replied. He tapped his fingers lightly on the table, thinking, calculating, and for the first time, so was I. In exchange for what? He asked, because of course there was always an exchange, always a cost. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady. You walk away from my work, completely. No claims, no clauses, no restrictions, and we stop this here. He raised an eyebrow. And the video? He asked. Stays, I said. He smiled faintly. Of course it does, he murmured. Daniel spoke up then, his tone firm. If this escalates further, it won't just be about her. It'll be about how this deal was built. Adrian's eyes flicked to him for a moment, then back to me. You've created pressure, he said. So have I replied. Another silence, but this one felt different, like something was shifting, balancing. And then he nodded, once. Very well, Adrian said. We amend the agreement. My breath caught slightly, not in shock, but in confirmation, because this was it. This was the moment everything turned. Full rights revert to you, effective immediately. Daniel exhaled quietly beside me, tension finally breaking just a little. And in return, Adrian added, this doesn't go any further legally. I held his gaze. It won't, I said, as long as it ends here. He